Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Tinfoil Saturday. How's it going? Ready for another foil stream? We have a special guest with us today, which I'm gonna go ahead and unmute. Hello?
Hi, hello.
Hello! Are you okay with me using your first name? Or do you want me to just call you
Yeah,
Profane
sure.
Priestess? Okay.
You can use my name.
Everyone, you will recognize this fine lady from the chat. This is Profane Priestess, or Amber, who is gonna come today and talk to us about history and conspiracies. So, tell us a little bit about yourself and what interests you in history and sociology and stuff like that.
So, I guess a little bit of background on why you should give a shit what I have to say about any of this, because that's important, right?
Yeah.
Uh, my name's Amber, of course. I am a history student at the University of Missouri, uh, and my interest in conspiracy theories is, well, first of all, I am a trans woman, so the confluence of conspiracy and far right politics and anti-queer sentiment cannot go understated. So that's one point of interest. But from a more academic perspective, I am very immersed in the field of history. It's my history and anthropology and sociology are my passions. So on one hand, lies about such things anger me, but on the other hand, I find them fascinating because I want to understand why someone would be invested in not believing my field.
Sure, I can understand that. That's something I think a lot of us here understand is getting upset because people on the line believe weird things. That's almost the theme of the show. That fits right in. So, let's see. I do have some videos pulled up before we get into them. I have some stuff I gotta read, so sit tight while I get through the capitalism stuff. Okie Dad, thanks for 25 months, says hola everybody. Been a while since I've been able to join a live, and as such, Doug, the best director, needs his 18-month sub-sibling. Viva la revolution. This sub-baby's name is going to be Amber. Come up with a sub-baby name.
Uh, how about Mr. Bluebell the Third? He's the heir to the Bluebell ice cream fortune.
There you go. Perfect sub-baby name. M. Scheffler with 32 months says, I feel like I should get credit for my time watching TBR and my sub anniversaries. Unstable Deadbeat with 12 months says, Hi Hannah, guests, and everyone in chat. Happy Saturday. Hope you're all doing well. Hope you are too. Social Warlock Trey says, Bits for the girl. Not you, Hannah, other girl. I know what you meant. Excessive Observer, thanks for 50 months. All right. So, let's see. First off, I pulled up a Tartaria video. Pretty much every video today is Tartaria-based because that's the big historical conspiracy theory these days. So yeah, I thought we'd jump into this. This one is entitled Old World 101. Seems like a place to start. Cool?
Cool.
Okay.
Oh, thank you, Phoenix.
What do we do about the state of the world? Perhaps it always seems like it's falling apart. With the research we do, we discover that it fell apart long ago. They want to teach us that everything is progressing, but a quick study shows that things have only gone backwards.
Would you care to speak on that statement?
I think I will, because there is this end of history narrative that we're either done with the world or it'll only keep getting better and better and nothing bad will ever happen. And I do think that is an element of sort of what drives people to not believe history, because if you have sort of in your head this idea that we have emerged from the dark ages and we're going to move continuously in progress, and then you look out at the world and you do not see that internal progress. You say things like social decline in the light of late stage capitalism, if you have been taught this pseudo historical myth, I think it's similar to when people are taught really bad things about drugs, and then when they find out that propaganda isn't true, it can lead them to overcorrect.
Yeah.
So it's possible we're seeing a similar phenomenon here.
Yeah, you referenced The End of History. That's even the title of a book that was relatively popular in, I think, the 90s after the fall of the
It
Soviet
is.
Union. Yeah.
And as a bit of a fun fact, the historian who wrote it no longer agrees with his opinion that he expressed in that book.
I think that would be pretty hard, I think, after 9/11 to stick with
Uh,
that.
for
9/11
people
and
who don't
everything that
know,
happened, but, you know.
yeah, for people who don't know, to put it very simply, of course, it's a long treatise on historiography, so we don't have time to get into all the details, but sort of the idea of the end of history is that liberal democracy, as we understand it, representative democracy, and capitalism, as they are married in the United States, is the ideal social structure, and there is no need to progress past it.
Yeah, they basically
Uh,
think that's it. That's it. We did it. We built the machine. We did it. We built the thing. It's perfect now. There is no more permutations, only devolutions.
exactly, and the funny thing too is that the guy who wrote it is no longer a capitalist.
Oh,
Well, he's still a capitalist, I guess one would say, but he has drifted away from sort of the liberal, liberal, laissez faire capitalism of the post World Wars, and now he endorses something more similar to what we would call like the Nordic model,
yeah.
with a extensive social safety net, high income taxes, strong union membership, things like that. So it's interesting that even though people still cite that book, the person who wrote it is no longer a believer in the idea they expressed within it.
Yeah. I do want to point out, too, I was talking with Trey yesterday, and Trey compared society to a bridge, and some people, similar to what I just said, it's where I got it actually, is the idea of this like machine, or as Trey put it, a bridge that they see as complete, and any change is only worse. It's not different. So credit to Trey on that one.
So he's very smart.
Alright, continuing.
I am truly a conservative. I despise the socialistic agenda in the past and present, though I do think we should work together as sovereign individuals. I don't blame those in power
That's
for.
pause it real quick. That's
Mhm.
like a common sentiment in a lot of right wing conspiracy theories. They express an admiration for cooperation and we shouldn't be concerned with profit. We should just get together and we'll pool our resources and we'll make sure everyone's taken care of and they'll celebrate those ideas. But if you attach a label they don't like to them, say socialism or social democracy or the welfare state, they'll turn against you. And I wonder if I may go on a little bit of a sociology rant for a moment.
Go for it. That's what you're
uh,
here for.
there are, broadly speaking, uh, three major. There are others, but we're simplifying for a popular audience, of course. Uh, three major interpretive frameworks, if you will, in the social sciences. Uh, the first is functionalism, which seeks to analyze a social structure by the function it plays in a society. Pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
The second is conflict theory, originally invented and popularized by one Karl Marx. It is
I
a.
think you mean Richard Marx. I don't know if you remember
Oh,
that.
I do. I'm discredited now. I'll leave. Uh, but uh, the idea behind conflict theory is to understand a society, you should understand the goals of the groups within it and how they conflict with each other, and more specifically, what are the dominant groups in a society, and how do those groups use their power to maintain themselves, to prevent other people from acquiring power. And the third, and I think most useful in this case, when we're talking about the idea that if you don't call it socialism, they'll agree with you, is symbolic interactionism, which, in its broadest strokes, he preferred dick marks. Okay, I'll keep that in mind. In its broadest strokes, symbolic interactionism is the idea that society should be understood by the interactions and symbols that take place in them, hence
Mhm.
the name. And part of that is a concept we call labeling, this idea that things are not understood based on what they are, things are understood based on their label.
Right.
So, a classic example outside of this, just so people understand another example of how this works. They don't like communism because it's labeled that way, and that label carries stigmas. Another example of this might be you have two students in a class who both forgot their homework, right? They both forgot their homework. Whatever reason, doesn't matter. One student, though, is really well liked and gets really good grades, so the teacher goes, "Oh, they're a pretty good student. I really shouldn't, but I'll let them slide this once." And one of them is a bad student, so the teacher goes, "Of course they forgot their homework. They probably didn't even bother." So this is the idea of we don't understand the meaning of things objectively. We
Mhm.
understand them based on the stigma we and others bring to them. And I think about that a lot when we're talking about right wing feelings towards left wing politics.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I was reading a book recently, I think it was this one, Talking to Strangers by Malcolm Gladwell, and he was talking about an experiment that was done. Oh god, I lost my train of thought. It was basically comparing judges, and judges believe that, judges tend to believe that they're good at telling if people are liars or not, and they're not, because no one's good at telling when people are liars. Like, statistically, no one is, even though there
Yeah,
are plenty of people that will claim to. And they tend to judge people based on superficial labels or superficial, and I'm not just talking about like racism or stuff like that, but classist sentiment, or this person reminds me of some group of people one way or another, and I am going to define them by that instead of the actual facts of the case. Similarly, it's
exactly.
not about what's in the box, it's about the picture on the outside and how that picture makes you
Exactly.
feel. Yeah.
The recent control grab. I think with the death of the Queen, there's a shift taking place, a new order, and this new group is not wasting any time rolling out their agendas. What the past events in the
Yeah,
last
that the
few
Queen of England did not have some sort of, I would guess this person's going to believe, elitist agenda. She was literally a monarch, but she was somehow protecting us from the dastardly power of the elites is very funny to me.
I don't think that's necessarily what he's saying. I think he thinks it's an acceleration thing. He can't just think, well, a person died because they were old. He has to think it's part of a plan, and that plan might be we had to sacrifice her for some nefarious, esoteric purpose. Doesn't make sense,
Maybe.
but I don't think he was trying to illustrate that he thought she was protecting as much as it was a portent of things to come.
Maybe. Maybe you're right.
Benekagami says grifters are proof of how few people are good at telling who's a liar. No
years,
one's good at telling who's a lie. Like, people just are wrong. If you think you're good at
Your
telling if
in
people are liars, you're wrong.
your insight skill is lower than you think it is.
Yeah.
Your wisdom is not that high.
have shown us is that all nations, all leaders, are actually following the same playbook. Doesn't matter what their
Is that
political
playbook
standing.
called
Free
something along the
election seem
lines
to be a
of
thing
the
of the
protocols
past,
of the
and many
elders at
nations
Zion?
don't even
Is that the name of the
Probably.
playbook?
The bedrock at the bottom of every conspiracy theory, in the West at least, is anti-Semitism.
illusion. You're just stuck with your leader. And again, I don't blame them. It is perhaps their karma, and these people will simply play their roles. And as for me, I ask the same, that I'm left to play my role. I know I was born with God-given rights, and I will exercise those until my death. I thank you for being here, and welcome. So today I've compiled a list. It's not a complete list, but it's a snapshot of this research. The research into the old world and our
He has a list. It
Oh.
must be true.
I was gonna say, I don't know if a list of things is research.
Oh, there's Tartaria. There's the thing.
Tea Time Tea says, I miss when I thought conspiracies were just like, Bigfoot is real, and this means nothing else about the world except that there's a weird monkey. The weird monkey was inside of us all along.
true origins.
We are the weird
so
monkeys.
it's not in order, as that's one of the most difficult things to make sense of, the chronology. But for many, this research begins with the World's Fair. All of the World's Fairs. There were hundreds of them, and it's a great place to start. Going back to the mid-1800s, almost every major city in the world hosts some sort of fair. We're told these fairs took a year or two to build, that they were temporary, and eventually destroyed.
I think this is another people mistaking the surface for, and I know this is a literal example, but they look at these buildings and go like, wow, they look like grand classical buildings. They must be ancient. Instead of recognizing that it's like cement and stucco that they shaped to look like that. Like, it's not the same materials.
It's a facade.
Yeah, it's a facade.
And I wonder, given that there is such an overlap between conspiracy theories, anti-Semitism, and both of those things overlapping rather heavily with fascism, I do sometimes wonder if these people, what comes first? Are you a fascist who believes the world needs to be reborn first? Or what I think is more likely from like a psychological and sociological perspective, in my head, it makes a lot of sense that if you believe in this idea that the world is going through these cycles of decline and then destruction, and then we find these ruins of a glorious civilization. If you already believe that there was or is some glorious lost civilization, I think that makes it a lot easier to believe that we need to do whatever it takes to get back to those glory days.
Yeah, it's that same idea of the idealized past, but in this case it's even more fictive than the typical conservative 1950s ideal of the past. Like, this is an ancient, non-existent past, even more so than the Leave It to Beaver shit they believe. Got a raid. Tina 2, thank you for the raid. Raiders, welcome. I'm Hannah. Today we're talking about conspiracy theories with the Profane Priestess, talking about Tartaria, fake history, and why people believe it. So give a follow if you like what you see, and make sure you check out Tina 2. Real quick, let me also get these bits messages. Michelle Gladio says, perhaps life, in a way, is just one big monkey. Like a Saiyan. Fenekagami says, I'm agreeing with, I've fallen for grifters and liars. We all have. I fell for Illuminati for years, for example. Yeah, I used to be a fan of hers, too, before all that shit came out. Fucked up.
Harold Elbowman. I would not say that the idea that we exist in a world that is past the best days of its civilization is inherently fascist. Because we're how do I want to put this? Were the early scholars who learned Greek and Roman so they could read Roman manuscripts during the Renaissance fascist for doing that, for wanting to go back to old ideas to inspire themselves? No. The idea that there was some period in the past that was good or that we can learn from is not what makes one a fascist. I think what makes one fascist is to believe that and to be willing to do terrible things to get back that lost glory.
Yeah, I think some of it's in how it's used rhetorically. It's almost an excuse. Things should be a certain way. We're falling from glory. Therefore, this excuses all of these things I want to do. It's using it as a motive towards extreme action that is generally violent or suppressive against people that they consider to be social outcasts or lower than them on what they consider to be the hierarchy of what should be. Also, hydrate.
I should hydrate.
Drink the water! Drink it!
I will.
Drink
I will.
it!
I know I've got to. I'm in Spiro. I know I've got to.
Hundreds of buildings at each fair, and as little as just one or two remain. We have them in St. Louis, Chicago, San Francisco, even in the Midwest. And it's one thing if they all looked different, or even looked like fairs. But what
I'm sorry, this is...
They look the same for a reason, though.
They're
We
going...
exist in the West, and we want to make ourselves appear Roman or Greek.
We have a cultural belief that our lineage is directly tied to the Romans. The pretty pervasive general aesthetic. Like, people like that. Look at Washington, D.C., for fuck's sake. I think you could literally drop like a Roman emperor in Washington, D.C., and he'd be like, oh, okay, we're doing pretty good.
Until a car came by.
Yeah.
What they look like is elegant cities with waterways and absolutely overbuilt for the population and budget of the time. When we study these buildings, we see that they're
overbuilt for the population. It's a World's Fair. People were going to travel for it from the surrounding area. People weren't living in the fair.
It also historical method rant, if I may. There is an acronym that is taught in a lot of history courses. If you're an advanced student in high school, you might have heard this. If you've been to a college and taken history classes, you've probably heard this. But there's an acronym, HIP, HIPP. These people are looking at this and thinking about it from their perspective. But what you really should do is HIP stands for four things that you have to remember if you're analyzing a historical document, right? The H is historical context. When was this photo taken? What was going on around this photo, which you just mentioned? It wasn't built for people to live in. It was built to look nice for a fair,
Yeah.
right?
I say that as a theme park. Oh, sorry, didn't mean to hit that. I say this as a theme park fan. The fact that they think that these must be impressive because how the outside looks is hilarious to me. You people haven't watched tons of internet videos on what rides look like on the inside, and it shows.
And the next thing you have to remember is a document's intended audience. Why was this photo taken? It was probably an ad. Look at the World's Fair. It's so cool. You should come see it.
Yeah.
And then the two P's are purpose and point of view. What biases did the people making a document come to it with, and why did they make it? And I feel as though these people don't bring any of those thoughts into their analysis. They're not thinking about what was happening at the time, why the document was written or the photo was taken, who took it, or for what purpose. They're just thinking about it as a photo, not as a historical document.
Yeah, they
Does
look
that
at it
make
like
sense?
they're thinking, well, if I saw this in front of me right now, how would I interpret it? They have this incredibly myopic worldview where they're unable to model the worldview of others, I think. That's what I get from conspiracy theories. That's speculative, but it feels like they have problems modeling the minds of other people and other perspectives, and it's a huge impediment to their ability to navigate the world and determine reality, obviously. I have some bits messages I'm gonna do real quick. Fennikagami
Okay,
says...
while you do that, I'm gonna run to the bathroom.
Okay. Fennikagami says, I mean, in some aspects, America was better off before Reagan because of the New Deal helping keep rich in line, better than what we have now. Unfortunately, the caveat for that is the mentally ill, queer people, and women had less rights back then, and everyone not a white Protestant man. Let's just raise tax rates for the wealthy. We can do that and have gay rights. Sounds great. Stephen J. Neptune Man says, a Roman emperor sees an airplane. What is that demonry? Oh, what is that demonry? See the sun sphere at the word for... Explains why projection is so pervasive. I think generally on the right, that's a problem. An inability to put oneself in the shoes of other people. I don't know if it's a lack of empathy. Saying that sounds like a judgment, and that's not what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to express what I see, and what I see is an inability or trouble understanding that people think differently than you. If not legitimately, at least an outward inability to articulate it. So, I don't know. Kind of interesting. Let's see, what am I gonna do? Well, Amber's gone. I should know how to entertain an audience, considering, my job. Oh, by the way, this is good news, everyone. The first costume for the new costumes came in. Miss Frizzle. The Miss Frizzle costume came in. I won't show you the dress yet, but I will give you a little teaser. Little appetizer. Miss
I'm
Frizzle.
here. I'll vamp for time when you're getting the costume.
I got it.
Oh, you're back. Go.
Yes. It is Liz and the bus. The dress is in here too, but I'm gonna save that for when that gets voted on.
Cute.
That's exciting. I think the judge costume will be here either tomorrow or Monday. Depends on if Amazon delivers tomorrow. I don't know what the deal is. Alright, ready to continue?
Then you'll be the judge, and Marcel will be fucked.
True. The judge. And I'm a judge. And we're all judges. And we're all fucked.
Temporary. The same designs we see anywhere in the world. And it is a complete untruth to say that a 4, 5, 6-story building is temporary. A building...
I find it interesting that he considers the number of stories to be important in determining how long a building should last. It's interesting.
I guess it's almost like a form of proportionality bias. Why build big building if not want for long?
That's actually a really good comparison. Yeah, proportionality bias, for those that don't know, is our inherent belief that big actions or big events must have big causes. That's why JFK conspiracies are so big in part, because how could one man, kill the president of the United States? Or 9/11, how could a group of terrorists hijack planes and cause this huge worldwide event, People have a hard time grasping little things, and small groups of people or individuals can do this. The same idea. Why build big building if only have for small time? Because it's an exhibit.
And also, to his point of why do all these World's Fairs in all these different places look the same, i.e. neoclassical, I think it would help these people for them to, before they ask that question, pull up a map of the Roman Empire at its height, it's because it ruled most of those countries.
It's funny, too, because I hate how they ask questions in just a sea-lining way or a begging the question way. This guy doesn't want an answer to this question, because he could have that question answered easily. He doesn't want to answer the question, but he also doesn't want to outright state, I think these are all built, like, he doesn't want to just say it, because it sounds ridiculous. So instead of saying directly, these are all fake, although he does imply it, he says it by begging the question. Rhetorically, it makes him seem not someone who's shoving an insane belief on you. It's someone who's implying something. It's someone who's making it look like they're trying to make you think about something, but they've set up the discussion in such a way to imply the answer without saying it.
At its most sinister, and I'm not saying I think this is intentional for many of them, but it is a byproduct. I also think it makes you look like the bad guy, because why is it wrong for me to just be curious, to just ask questions, to just want to know? And again, I'm not saying that it's intentional, but it is a inbuilt defense mechanism, I think.
Agreed. Ash the Poetic Fox, thanks for 40 months, says, hey Hannah, hey special guest, keep doing what y'all do. I will.
Special guest, that's me.
Must be structurally sound to stand, and this 100% means it is not temporary. So again, if the World's Fair in Chicago resembles the World's Fair in Brazil, we must be dealing with something other than a fair. All the same time,
Because
Now
they
you're
look
dealing
different.
with the byproducts of colonialism.
True.
Right?
True.
Like, either the Roman Empire ruled that place directly, or somewhere that used to be ruled by the Roman Empire ruled that place.
Yeah.
So that's why Rome's culture, its vibe, if you will, gets exported almost everywhere in the world.
Yep. Jay Rodimus says, I know it's only slightly related, but just last night I saw a community post from a Transformers YouTuber I used to watch. I was horrified to see that it was a tirade against the latest Transformers show for having, quote, harmful gender theory, unquote, in a kid's show, and he was so appalled that the show went against his values and that people didn't immediately understand, and he claimed that this was not a message of hatred. Bigoted people truly believe they're the good guys, and it's horrifying. Yeah, no one thinks they're the bad guy. Richard Simmons died. Holy shit.
I think to believe oneself is the bad guy, unless you are a very special person, would be devastating to one's ego.
Yeah, you can't deal with that. People lie to themselves all the time about themselves in order to get through the day. They're certainly not going to deal with being evil.
I mean, I convinced myself I was a man for like 17 years.
There you go. Glad you got over that one.
Yeah, I'm much happier now.
period, all brought down, essentially demolished, and this seems to mark a beginning point. So the beginning point, we often call this the reset.
Ooh, he's got sound effects.
Got a title card and everything.
What
Lovely.
we see is fully built out cities, built of brick, stone, intricate metalwork,
Holy fuck, bricks! When were those invented?
and empty
While ago, probably?
How could put mud in the sun? It get hard is not a complex idea.
This guy saw ancient Babylonia. His mind would be fucking blown. You're telling me this wall is made of bricks?
True.
streets of mud, oftentimes brick poking up through the mud, and we see
That's clearly brick that has collapsed from buildings after a fire. Like, how do you look at this picture and not intuit the story here? Like, I've taken cognitive tests before that'll show you a picture like this, and it'll be like, what happened here? To prove that you are able to look at not literally this image, but, you know, usually illustrations of an event that has happened, and you have to work backwards and be like, given the results here, what caused this? Like, this might be a
And
genuine cognitive issue if he can't look at this picture and
it's
understand what he's seeing.
it's interesting too, because in the general populace, that instinct is very strong. I forget the psychological experiment, but it was like a cube, a triangle, and a circle in a box, animated on a screen, and if you showed it to people, they would invent the idea that the square was angry at the triangle and the circle was trying to calm them down. So like in most people this interpretive framework is very strong. So I think it's very interesting that some people seem to lack it.
Yeah, I forget the exact name of the experiment, but I actually found it. Hell yeah. It is in this book called Suspicious Minds by Rob Brotherton. There's actually a diagram of it right here. Let me see if it has a name. It was in 1943. Fritz Heider and his student concocted this experiment. But yeah, it shows that people have a tendency. We tell stories. I think that that's one of the main things that makes us human is our capability to form
Absolutely.
narratives and develop systems through those narratives. Like that's why we've been very
Absolutely.
successful in part, is because we can create systems, pass them on to people, and basically reify them into real things people take seriously.
The the concept of a social construct is really the thing that makes a human, really. The idea that we can imagine things, and by communicating that imagination to others of our kind, we can in an it's really one of the closest things to actual magic if you think about it from a certain way,
Yep,
because if in an act of collective will, we can make something real, and I think that's incredible.
it is. Also scary, but very cool.
Horse and wagons. Very few. Now it's the same thing in every city. The first pictures show completely built out cities with no people. As if
It's
somebody
so interesting that they assume this is like the city was just built 5 minutes ago. Like he sees like buildings that are destroyed and he assumes this is when the city is new? It's like he's working backwards. He has to believe that in order for this to work. Like it's like he doesn't
I
know, like, did you know they could have built this city before cameras were widespread and then they only got an opportunity to do a lot of photographs after a first disaster happened? Like something notable that people took pictures of? I don't know. This seems weird.
and I wonder too if there's just a lack of understanding of how different the technology was, like if they just don't understand the nature of an antique camera's sort of long exposure window, and why that by its nature makes it very difficult to capture the activity of a place.
Yeah.
I wonder if they just don't know that.
It's definitely come up
And
because you'll get those photos where it's a city and there's no one in the picture and they're like, why isn't there anyone in the picture? And it's like, there probably were people there. They were just moving around. They didn't sit there for 10, 20, 30 minutes while the photo was, while the film was exposed to light. So they're not in the picture because they weren't there long enough. Just, I don't know. It's a lot of things. I think part of it comes from the fact that they'll constantly bring up horses and buggies. And I think they do that because they genuinely have a black hole in their head. You know, if I thought today how a building's built, I don't know. Like, I'm not a construction worker, I'm not an engineer, but I can imagine the equipment that would be used. I could imagine what the people might look like. And again, this information might be wrong, but I have been given scripts in my head through society that says this is what a construction site looks like. This is what building a building looks like. So I know it exists. I cannot think to myself, what does it look like to build a building in 1873? I could vaguely, but it's more of a black hole of information. So I wonder when they face that, if it becomes an issue of them not recognizing why that's happening, and they go, it must not be true, because they can't imagine
and
what
I
it would
think
be.
I wonder maybe if it's not they don't know it, so it must not be true. I wonder if maybe to some extent the thought process is, and this is a very natural reaction, and maybe the way I'm going to put it is going to sound infantilizing, but I really don't mean it that way. Big things that you do not understand are frightening. So
Mhm.
maybe without the historical understanding of what the world was like, the idea of hundreds, maybe even thousands of years they don't understand is just too big psychologically that it becomes too frightening for them to internalize.
Yeah, I could see that for sure. I think I get that with creationists a lot. Is part of the reason is they find it disheartening and very scary to imagine the immensity of time and space and their very insignificant place in it, relatively speaking.
Exactly.
Is documenting the beginning. One of my favorite things to do over and over on this channel is to read the stories of these towns and cities and buildings, hoping for a logical explanation. And what we find is
I would so badly
hastily.
want to know. He says he likes reading, like, historical accounts of
Mhm.
cities being built. I would so badly like to know where he acquires his documents.
That's a good question. I don't know. He probably just Googles, like, Chicago, first-hand accounts, building city, something along those lines. I doubt he knows the word primary source document. I don't think he knows that phrase.
No,
So, like, I
almost
don't
certainly
imagine
not.
he's using that, but I don't know.
And I'm about to get political. You might wanna kick me out of chat. I'm gonna
Real quick,
go,
before you do that, I'm going to read Fenekagami's thing, and then you
yeah, go
go.
ahead.
Fenekagami says, so what you're saying is that if we had a better education and maybe beat main character syndrome out of people, we'd have less conspiracism in the world. Figuratively, sure, not literally beat it out of
Uh,
them, but expose
this is
people to
actually
relativism. Yes, I think that would be a good thing.
a
Yes.
great jumping off point for the tangent I was about to make. If I was myself a conspiracy theorist, I won't even say that because I think this is more just a product of circumstance. I would love to see the data, and I unfortunately don't have the sociological data at hand. But it seems to me, just on instinct, sociologically, that the defunding of sort of liberal studies or uh, arts colleges, non-STEM degrees, if you will, as a broad category, and the prevalence of conspiratorial thinking, it seems to me that those two things are probably correlated, and I would hazard to guess causally linked, but I don't have the data. I'm just speculating. But it seems to me that the two are tied.
It's probably a part of it. I think it's multifaceted. Some of it's people's material conditions getting worse, and when people are
Absolutely.
desperate, they get paranoid. Like, there's studies
That is.
showing the more desperate people are, the more paranoid they tend to be because they're desperate for answers, and people look for scapegoats.
And
So
I would
some of it's
I would
that.
absolutely caution against anyone telling you there's a singular solution
Yeah,
to a social problem.
yeah, no.
Uh, if you learn anything from sociology or history, it's uncomfortable and it's inconvenient and it makes solving problems harder. But remove from your mind the idea that human problems can be fixed as though we or our society are machines,
Yeah.
as though you can find the one broken thing in the engine and replace it and everything will be fine.
Yeah. It's a big amorphous thing. The big fabric and all interacting with itself and each other. Anyway, good for me to continue.
Yes, sorry, long tangent.
You're good. That wasn't that long. Have you heard me? Goddamn.
Written historical accounts of the beginning, making no sense. With the tools and tech available of the times, there's no way. These cities should go up so fast.
Notice that they
with
never talk about any specific technology that was used for building at the time, because I don't think they're aware of it. They just hand wave and
Also-
go, well, technology at the time couldn't have done this, without any amount of, like, actual looking into how they built stuff like this. I've never heard a Tartarian conspiracy theorist even once go into even the littlest amount of knowledge about actual building tools or techniques of this era or earlier.
Which is a real shame because if you actually read it, and maybe it's just me because I like history, the actual techniques used to build these kinds of structures are really quite fascinating.
Yeah.
Do you remember when uh, the bell tower at Notre Dame caught fire several years ago?
Mm-hmm.
That
Like
was
the whole
a
roof burned. They're still working on
that
fixing
was
it.
a super interesting time to be an architect or a historian
Mhm.
because the French government, with its not always good obsession with its own historical lineage, a thing that itself I think is kind of fascist, but that's beside the point, was really fixated on authentically restoring the roof and tower of Notre Dame.
Yep, I heard
So
about this.
they commissioned dozens of historians and architects to reinvent the tools that were used to build it.
That
So it was a really fascinating time to be a historian, especially in Europe.
I can't even imagine being one of the historians that got the call for that. Like, if you're specifically in a field and a subset of that field that involves, like, building techniques of that period, you're probably very familiar with any accounts that exist of the building of, like, the cathedral itself. And then you get a
It was
call and, like, hey,
crazy.
we need help figuring out how to build this. You want to come help?
It was crazy because the forest that was originally used to harvest the timber that was used in the roofing doesn't exist anymore. So, like, the French government hired, uh uh, what's the word for people who study trees? Arborists to hunt down trees that were as similar as possible to this forest that no longer exists.
Lame. They should have tried to find some sort of seed somewhere and cloned it. Lame. The French being lame as usual.
Don't let Napoleon hear you talking shit about the French.
He's fine.
But
He's on
he's
an
dead, so
island
you're
somewhere.
fine.
It's fine.
so little people and such little technology at their disposal. Power not coming around until the late 1800s at a World's Fair
Why would
in Chicago.
why would you think you needed power to build a cathedral?
Because big, it's big. How do without crane? How do without diesel crane?
And I think it would be again, I'm gonna keep harping on it, but it's really important to understand things within their historical context. Like, of course, they had the resources to build a cathedral. They thought that the Pope was the literal mouthpiece of an omnipotent God who was going to send you to a literal hell if you didn't build it.
Yeah, I think part of the problem for that is they go, what, this takes 100 years to build? Who would do that? That's stupid. They seem to have a personal incredulity problem where they're like, I wouldn't waste my time on that, so why would anyone? It's unbelievable for them, again, because, like you said, they can't put themselves in the mindset of someone from that period or place. They can only transport themselves to that with their current mind. They can't imagine a situation where they're not them in that situation.
It's also important to note, in the case specifically of a cathedral, that from a practical standpoint, the Catholic Church ruled vast swaths of Europe, so there was really no limit of the resources they can pour into whatever they wanted to build.
I think the modern day relative separation between church and state has made some people, like conspiracy theorists, pretty blind to how the two were effectively the same through a lot of history.
Absolutely.
Like, they just don't think about it like that. They don't, I don't know. It's interesting. Jason Proxy, thanks for a 5-stream streak.
We're told it is introduced, and logically this is when we should start seeing improvements in the building style, and for the most part, the most beautiful city layouts and architecture have all been created before this introduction of power. I typically focus on...
As if there are no practical or material reasons that cities are the way they are, or architecture is the way it is. It's like he thinks every city, there's one guy at the top that goes, here's what the city's gonna look like, and here's how we're gonna do it. There are no practical considerations.
I don't think we're playing bingo, but I think doesn't understand their problem is capitalism on the bingo card, because the sort of claustrophobic and unpleasant way many modern cities are designed is in large part due to the fact that we don't design them to be lived in, we design them to be worked in.
Yep.
North America, because it's A, where I live, and B, one of the youngest nations, we are told. But the same thing can be done anywhere in the world. People
Young
often
is a
dismiss
relative term when we're talking about nations.
Europe and say, well, it's very old. But it's no different in Europe. Same predicament.
An AI image? That looks like an AI image. I don't know for sure. Kind of looks like it. Or it looks like that one city from Assassin's Creed 2. You know what I'm talking about? No?
Bueller.
How are they building all of these cities without power, modern tools, and technology? When photography does finally get...
Time. A great deal of... Again, I want to sit these people down and go, hundreds of years. Hundreds of them. The people who laid the cornerstones of some of these buildings died before they were complete. Because if you didn't work on them, the king would execute you.
A very different world. A very different world. I don't think they're able to understand.
I guess.
What's my...
I'm not going to get into my feudalism rant. I won't.
I Hate Twitch Times 2 says, what's your thoughts on the line in Saudi Arabia? Not gonna happen. It was never gonna happen. That was a bad idea from the start.
It's a stupid idea.
It reintroduced, in my opinion. This is the kind of scene
absolutely
that we
depraved
have.
ambiance.
Again, a city, cathedrals, spires, and a complete mess. Every city having problems with sewage. Doesn't make any sense that you would have a whole city and still be using outhouses.
You idiots! Why didn't you just construct a complex sewer system, you fucking idiots?
Just invent indoor plumbing. It can't be hard, can it?
Why would you build this big city and you don't even have, like, I don't know, like an electric train in 1800? I don't know. What is he doing? He just thinks it's just a thing you have. Like, infrastructure's easy and just... He takes everything for granted!
I'd also point out people back then and people now, from like a broad biological perspective, are not different. They were not stupider than us. They were not less creative than us. They
Nope.
just the race had just been around a lot less. However, in terms of how creative and intelligent people are, I really recommend, if you have access to any kind of university library or a historical journal, anywhere you can get some actual documentation, look into the horticulture that went into keeping the Roman Empire running. At its height, the city of Rome was populated by over 1 million people, and to read some of the documents of what it took for them to keep those people alive
I wasn't told I would have to read for
really
this.
it's your homework, don't worry.
Okay.
Really goes to show how there is no difference in our creativity or our intellect.
No. Education, knowledge, technology developed. Jay Rodimus says, at least for once they're questioning white people's accomplishments instead of just brown people. And Fennikagami says, the problem is that the solipsism that causes them to use incredulity as their starting point for why they fall into Tartaria would also cause them to be unable to connect with you on why they think Tartaria's... Wait. To connect with why you think Tartaria is stupid, no matter how much you explain to them, postmodernism is so important to critical thinking.
It really is. It really is. I know Jordan Burnt Peterson. Still can't believe his middle name is Burnt, but uh really has tainted so much of people's ability to think, because he's tarred not only things that are postmodern that are important, but also things that are useful for critical thinking that aren't sort of a postmodernist approach. People, and these people tend to be right wing, are really afraid of complex thought, and I'm not sure how we fix that.
I don't know either. That's a hard one.
Unless you're just moving into this city in ruins. The ruins that we do see, we generically call the mud flood. I mean, it's mud and ruins everywhere, not looking like normal living. Giant walls and castles, domes.
Going to a construction site in my city and calling it ruins because there's dirt everywhere.
Gold, metal, tech, and then mud everywhere. Horse and wagon.
Wait a minute, you had gold, metal, and dirt? I don't know. Seems sus.
You can only have one of those things. You can't have all three. It's not possible.
I will take the
The
dirt.
physics won't allow it.
People building little wooden ramps everywhere, wooden sidewalks, wooden shacks when they do build something. Surrounded by this, more specifically, the mud flood is talking about all the debris that has buried the buildings. Here, for example, we can see the door to this church, and the door is halfway up. I mean, are you really building this much footer? Half of the building? Or has this been repurposed?
Talked about this before. Throughout history, various cities built above a layer. Like, I think Chicago did this. Basically, there was a big fire, and then they just built shit on top of the old shit.
There's like an entire under Chicago. There's like an entire undercity.
Yep.
Just because of how many times it's burnt down and been built on top of.
Yep, you can tour it, and it's also in Futurama why the joke of New York being under New York is a thing. It's a joke about how cities have done that.
It's also featured prominently in the Dresden Files, one of my favorite book series.
To accommodate this cataclysmic event. In modern times, they are constantly discovering buildings underground. Not archaeologists, just construction workers, putting in
Okay.
utilities.
Are they digging stuff
up? Sometimes you gotta dig to build something.
Yeah.
Buildings need a foundation.
Mm-hmm.
and sometimes that has to go underground.
Mm-hmm.
Of course they dig. I don't understand the incredulity here.
Confusing.
In city centers and discovering a whole realm of brick below our feet. This is the mud flood. What else are you going to call it? Oftentimes people ask me, what do you think?
I guess they maybe don't understand that for many, many centuries, like 70% of a city was wood and like only the other 30% was stone. So like what is left is just whatever remained if
Yeah,
the wood caught fire.
it's funny when they'll be like, oh, people in horse and buggy built this, and they'll show like a cathedral or a palace or something, and it's like, that would be like, I've literally heard them be like, why would people not be living in buildings like this? You tell me they were living in shacks, and it's like, it would be like looking at a picture of a skyscraper and being like, oh, they can build this, why doesn't everyone live in one? Like, because that's the nature of the economics of the commodification. Like, you can't have
There-
everyone living in a giant skyscraper to themselves. That's not how life works. Like, they were...
Society was and still is very stratified.
Yeah.
And I I don't even understand how they have this sort of how do they forget that about the past when it's still true now? It's very interesting.
Mud flood is. And I think that it's a byproduct of not only water creating a flood, a jolting of the fishbowl, but also some great electrical discharges that essentially cooked this realm, and all living creatures returned their waters back to the earth. All the trees.
What?
He said the earth was cooked, so he said, earth.
Giant trees, all the creatures turning to water.
I know, I'm
buildings
insufferable.
buried. And of course I don't know, but it seems
Convenient that everyone turned into water. There's no evidence. That's nice. It was nice of them to do that. Benikagami says, this is also ignoring the fact that fire can destroy stone and masonry. We see this now, like masonry is fire resistant, not fire immune. And then Freyline says they always talk about big buildings compared to wood shacks. What do they think of modern downtowns near slums? The link. I will click. Yep. It's almost like inequality's a thing.
Inequality has been a thing for a long time, unfortunately.
it's pretty plausible. We may have some clue of this event in our mainstream history. Just like every major city has a World's Fair, every city has not only one, but several great fires.
Again,
Well, yes, they were built mostly out of wood, and you needed fire to see.
You needed fire
Sorry,
to
I didn't mean to interrupt
No,
you.
you're good. You're just saying the same stuff I was good at. You need fire to see and cook, and everyone has fucking oil lanterns everywhere. It's a goddamn powder keg. It's amazing that any city lasted more than a decade at a time.
Great fires. All around the same time period, or at least at the beginning of the construction of most of these cities. In the case with San Francisco, it burnt down 6 or 7 times before the Great Fire of 1906. And I think a grain of truth has been applied to even our modern history. But rather than all of these fires being isolated, we zoom the camera lens out and see the bigger picture. In this early time period, every city and often town is burning, and that leads us into the construction timelines.
Corridor says, ironically using the Q blip effect as a transition. How is he less charismatic than Hans?
No power.
Chat, how dare you?
And a very small
This conspiracy theorist put together wackadoo bullshit for us, and you're gonna call him boring?
population, apparently you could build entire...
I actually will.
Everyone's a critic.
Yeah. I will move on to another video, though, because we've been watching this forever. This is Howdy Mikowski on the truth of our simulation, hidden history in Tartaria.
Ooh boy.
Fenekigami says it's especially amazing how long some cities lasted when you consider that for a long time, fire brigades were a for-profit venture if they existed at all.
I was just going to say, there are multiple simulations, so that's just our simulation. But simulations go back thousands of years. I wouldn't doubt that there's simulation, that the simulation itself of the whole, that might be 10, 20, 100,000 years of total. But just like a Westworld robot, like a Westworld robot gets turned on one day, and for them, it's February 1, 1860, and they've been living 20 years in their backstory. All the things that have been programmed into them, to them, really happened, right? They really were born, they really had these things with their parents.
Unironically believe in last Thursdayism?
I was literally about to say that. For those that don't know, last Thursdayism is the belief that everything in the universe started last Thursday, including you, and all the memories you have of everything before last Thursday are fake, and were just created as part of your brain. Just
But
kind
also,
of it's sort of a silly, borderline solipsistic belief.
But also, one of my distaste for solipsism, I don't care if solipsism is true. Let's say I'm not actually talking to you right now.
Mhm.
You are not real. You are a figment of my brain in a jar, or in a cave, or whatever. In a computer where my energy is being harvested by robots. Whatever. Why does it matter?
Nothing you can do
For
about it.
every practical purpose, I'm still interacting with you.
Yeah.
So what does it matter if, objectively, for whatever that means, you're not real? Like,
So-
I think it's a non-argument, really.
Yeah, I put it as solipsism is not useful. It's irrelevant. It's irrelevant. You gotta just move past that. Descartes did, you got it too. You just gotta move past it if you want to live life.
Although, if there is a demon who's secretly in control of all my thoughts and feelings, can we talk? Can I meet you?
I'm into demons, so like, was this whole thing just to get
Right?
me into demons? Is the demon hitting on me?
Right,
What's
right.
going on?
That seems like a weird workaround.
Toreador says, I never could get the hang of Thursdays. Unstable Deadbeat says, like 2 days ago or like a week and 2 days ago? Either or. M. Scheffler says, it's clear Hannah's real. We can see her. Or so you think. You think this is me?
Thank you, Trevor. Thank you, Trevor.
This thing really happened in the town, but it's just backstory. And I think that's similar what happened whenever this simulation got turned on. It was because it makes sense. If you're going to have a simulation, it's easier to take a previous one, remake some changes,
Yes, I do,
add
Big
to
Steph
it.
fan.
Fenekigami says, so you're saying the joke starts to a wacky fantasy story start of the universe, like it was a Tuesday in an actual belief system. Yeah, not many people actually believe it, but it is a belief that some people hold.
Alter it, and put your new one on top of that rather than start from scratch. So first it makes sense from a building standpoint, and then it means, well, you've got a whole history built into your new simulation automatically. You just move that history into this one. So it's not that, like I would say, did things not happen in the 1600s or the 1500s? Yeah, they did. Things definitely happened, but maybe not to us. They're a backstory. They were real in a different simulation, but now when we flicked on, but now that's my guess. How about this for screwing up people's minds? What if the simulation we're in started May the 9th, 2009? Wouldn't that means everything from our lives, like when we were kids, that's backstory. Didn't actually happen if that were true. I'm not saying that's the case, but these are the kind of things, once you start saying this might be a type of simulation. Well, that's why the most important question would be, if that's true, when did it start? Because then
I feel like
Why?
we've skipped a
would it
lot of
matter?
steps. It wouldn't matter. It wouldn't matter at all. It could be 3 seconds ago. It could be 300 years ago. It wouldn't matter for all intents and purposes. Like, why would it matter? I don't get it.
It indicates everything of what we should then be determining as important or not, or what we should study or not. Right. Well, yeah, well, again, it's like, yeah, so I've got the word reset, right, which is in a sense a new, we've got like
Sure, DJ Shay, I'll believe you. DJ Shay says, would you believe me if I said May 9th, 2009 was a Thursday? Oh, damn it. Says it wasn't. It was a Saturday. Fell for it.
I would call these restarts. Let's put it that way. The simulation goes to, we don't like something, we're going to rechange, we're going to restart it, or, no, that'd be a reset. We're resetting it. So
wait, the aliens or whatever are save scumming? This is bullshit.
Listen, let he who has not save scummed throw the first stone.
That's a lie. I play Bethesda games. I do that a lot, actually.
anyway,
No,
forget the name.
I
There's
think
two
it's a
different ways this
requirement
happens.
for
One
a
simulation
Bethesda game.
ends, and for some reason they decide we want to have a different simulation. We want something to be different, so we turn one off and we turn the next one on. In one sense, we're in that process now. We're in a process of this simulation going to be turned off again, and the new one getting turned on. They're calling that the 5D ascension world, whatever they want to call it. It's really going to be the transhumanistic tied into the machine.
What
But
would
I always wonder-
transhumanism even mean in the context of you being a virtual thing? That doesn't even make sense. You're not flesh and blood to begin with, so what would it matter?
Transhumanism to these people has lost so much of its meaning until now it's just a buzzword.
Yeah, it doesn't. It's a vibe. It's a vibe. It's the idea of some sort of transcendence, and it's either negative or positive depending on their, beliefs about the integrity of the human form or the purity of it.
Well, I'm an unironic transhumanist, so
Mhm.
I think I kind of have to be if I'm a trans person. I think those are pretty closely overlapping. I think.
Then we have the opposite, which would be a restart or whatever, where we loop back, whether it's 500 years, 1,000 years, and we relive.
Eustace says if we're simulations, are the things simulating us real or also simulations? Go watch the movie The 13th Floor.
all the simulations again one more time. I think that's happened to us I think we've gone through this time loop many times, because if you don't go, there's only 3 options when the simulation
Isn't this
ends.
also literally the plot of Starfield, that you go through the universe over and over and over again?
Yes, that is the end game of that. In No Man's Sky, it's also similar, and it's also explicit that you're in a simulation.
Is No Man's Sky canonically a video game within itself?
Yeah,
didn't know
I
that.
believe they effectively, I don't know if they outright say video game, but they end up being like, yep, you're in a simulation. Yeah.
Interesting. I didn't know that. Never played No Man's Sky.
It is what it is. Every 6 months or so, I'll be like, I'm gonna play No Man's Sky, and then I'll play for about 5 or 6 hours to be like, all right, gonna abandon that and not touch it again for months and months.
So basically how I feel about Minecraft.
Option 1 is you go forward into the new simulation, which you definitely don't want to do. 2, you would be able to exit all the simulations completely. Consciousness would understand its totality and what it is, and leaves. So if you don't do one of those two, what's the third choice?
So our consciousness does somehow exist outside of the simulation, though, because we can leave it.
Yeah,
so what is real to this person?
I don't know. I don't understand either. Does he think we're like physical bodies in pods like the Matrix? Does he think outside of our reality, like whatever is simulating us is not strictly physical and we all exist as some other thing outside? I don't know. It doesn't make any sense.
Or maybe he's like combining this with some sort of belief in a soul.
Maybe.
like our souls are in the simulation somehow, and leaving the simulation is sort of like going to heaven or something? I don't know.
Like you're a pattern in a transporter buffer in Star Trek. That made sense, trust me.
Not a Trekkie.
It made sense. I promise. It's a perfect metaphor.
Go
I
back
should be a
and
Trekkie.
be a part of the
You
same
should. You should watch Star Trek. It's great.
simulation you were in. And I'm writing about this in my book that bizarrely in the way that transhumanism and all the things that are being presented, it's also presenting a catch to get people to overly be attached to the world we have now, because they're trying to hold it. They're trying to keep the, good, you don't want the new one, but you're trying to hold on to this one.
I wonder, with him talking about, oh, all of this is an attempt to get us to hold on to the world, is this a coping mechanism for climate change? Like, is this... I don't know this person, but, like, his fixation on, like, we have to let go of the world and let it pass so we can move on to something new. I wonder if he just can't cope with the idea of, like, well, we've kinda ruined the planet, and if we don't get to fixing it real quick, we're all gonna but I don't know.
I get frustrated at conspiracy theorists, but on some level I get it. I get what would make you want to completely deny reality, because reality kind of fucking sucks. Like in a lot of ways, you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
So when that
But it's a shame that instead of working on these problems together, people go into their own little maladaptive coping mechanisms.
point happens and okay, everything is gone, it'll still be this, I don't want the new world. I can't leave. Well, I love the old world, so let's go back and do this again. And I think that's built into the reincarnation trick, we'll call it that rather than trap. I like that better. And so I think it all ties in a little bit together, that those are the three options. So we've got multiple simulations over the course of time, and I think you can actually potentially reset into further and further versions of the simulation and go through this process again and again and again. Right? But it just seems the historical record has indications where literally, like, the whole world civilization just seemed to stop at a particular time, and then 100 years later it's all flourishing again, and like, well, how did that happen? How did everything
What? What is he referencing? What?
I think he's referencing that big events will happen and set society back, but then things rebuild. So I think he's saying, like, I don't know, if I had to guess the last one, World War II. Like, he's saying, like, World War II happened and it devastated the entire world. Continents were, decimated in terms of their populations and society. That's my guess.
True. Probably has some real not accurate ideas about the Middle Ages.
There was a shooting at a Trump rally? Is there really? Because I saw someone come in and say a thing, but I thought it was a troll because it was so out of left field.
just destroy itself? That makes sense if it's like
Other people are coming in too.
someone pushed a button and did it on purpose.
So much of our history has been wiped from the history books and rewritten. The technology our ancestors had far exceeded some
Okay,
Oh, Trump
I'm
is
gonna
fine.
get into my rant because he's bringing it up. I'm gonna get into my historiography rant. What do these people think history is? Like, how do these people think it is written? Because how would one erase it when it is the product of thousands of people across every breadth of human society? Like,
I do not know.
I don't understand how these people think one would control it to erase things.
Sorry, I'm reading about the Trump thing. There was a shooting at his rally? That's nuts.
Oh, you're good. And back to our earlier point, the bedrock of all conspiracies, I wonder if a lot of these people think that history, quote unquote, is controlled by the Jews, maybe?
Mm,
and that's how they believe it is rewritten,
yeah,
because
they tend to believe it's someone at the top, and yeah, it usually ends up being anti-Semitic conspiracy.
Of the technology we see today, we still can't come close to building pyramids like the ancients. And how did they
yes,
know
we
such
could.
detail about star systems?
I need to remind Twitch chat, you're not allowed to wish people harm on Twitch. I will have to delete your
Thi-
comment if you do. I understand your thoughts, but you can't say it. Can't say it.
This talking point of how did ancient Egyptians understand the stars? I don't mean
Observation.
to be snide. They're above you. You look up.
Mhm.
Like they're right there.
Again, I think some of the problem is, how do I put this? They can't
A belief
they can't
in
imagine sitting down and figuring it out, so they can't imagine anyone doing it. Because it would be an arduous, boring process to sit there night by night and chart things and just write it down and slowly figure things out about how it moves and that it's cyclical. They can't imagine doing that, so they can't imagine anyone doing it.
and also, like I mentioned earlier, this idea that people in the past were less intelligent or less creative to some meaningful degree,
Yeah.
and that's why they would have needed aliens or some great civilization to tell them how to do it, when it just isn't true.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't know if this is a media thing. Like, does the media often depict people from the past as idiots? I guess. There is the trope, but, like, they understand that an average, like, person who didn't have education, like, there were people who had specific skill sets. I feel like they don't take that into consideration. Penikagami says, I mean, his history has had periods of erasure. Almost all of Norse and Celtic mythologies were erased by Christians, and we lost huge swaths of Celtic history and the ability to read a lot of what remains as a result. Yeah.
Absolutely. Um, I have a friend who is a Celtic pagan, so I talk about this a lot about how it is an arduous process to attempt to rebuild forgotten mythology, and it's an interesting process, but it is possible. So even when that example, and I'm not discounting the fact that it's been destroyed, it wouldn't stay destroyed forever because people are interested in reconstructing these things from what does remain.
Systems. We've been deceived. Check out this clip, which shows some of the technology from years past. Notice that much of the technology you'll see in the pictures are only recent for us today. Some of it doesn't exist altogether.
One moment.
Where do you think
I'm
this
being yelled at. I'll be listening.
Okay.
technology came from, and why was it lost? Or was it?
Our lost history.
Oh no, does he think this is an actual functioning robot and not just like a metal container that they fucking welded other metal shit to? It's a sculpture! It's a sculpture!
Was we more advanced?
Yeah, I'm hearing about the Trump stuff. I'm interested. I'm gonna wait. I'm gonna wait to find out more information before I say shit about this, cause woo!
Than we believed.
That's literally just a motorcycle, but with like a track, a tread, and not this, with a tread instead of like you could get like a snowmobile that would work similarly, but okay.
Research Tartaria.
That's what? Are they using just literally fake images?
Research
Lovely.
Tartaria.
Because like the water bike's real. This is probably an illusion similar to the Madame Tussauds, not Tussauds, Madame Leona illusion in Walt Disney World. Peeplord says, I assure you, we do control history and we erase it with our big space lasers set to a blue, pink, purple beam and boom, erased. Seriously, if Jews were half as powerful as they say we are, I wouldn't have just given my shirt to the good enough sniff test. Kagami says, we all know they're gonna say the shooter's trans or something, though. Oh, whatever. I can't even imagine the conspiracy theories I'm gonna have to deal with by next Tuesday. I just can't even imagine. This is gonna be a shit show. Yeah, these are literally just fake images that he apparently thinks are real. Okay. What is this supposed to even be? Like a ghost beam? You put a skull in here and then you can talk to the ghost of the skull? Cool. Oh yeah, the content will be great. I just care more about the well-being of the country than I do about my show, believe it or not. I'd rather things be okay and not have a bunch of conspiracy theorists freaking out rather than have good content for the show. I know there were photo manipulations back in the day, but the manipulation on those pictures looked modern. Still.
Sorry about that.
You're good.
They wanted to know what I wanted for dinner.
Hmm.
We're having turkey patty melts, so that's gonna be good.
Ooh, yummy.
Yeah, I don't eat meat, so
You know,
red
history
meat,
is one
I
of the
guess I
most
should say,
fascinating
to be specific. But
subjects out there, but it's like Howdy Mikowski said, we can never truly know what the true history was because it has been hidden from us. It has been buried and suppressed by the current powers that be. Why? Because they don't want us.
Who are the current powers that be? All the powers that be.
it's gonna be the Jews.
To know about all of these things that happened in the past, the incredible technology, the giants, all these magnificent cities and tunnels and systems that were in place. And this really is a shame because it's a lost history. And I've always wondered about the Americas. Were these people, these Native American Indians, nomadic, barbaric people that crossed over?
Oh boy!
Yeah, you probably want to
Oh boy!
go ahead and tackle that.
So America, specifically South America, is one of the cradles of civilization. The Olmec are one of the oldest civilizations we have on record. So the idea that native peoples of the Americas were this is deeply both racist and ahistorical.
Kagami says, on a lighter note, are you aware that there are now claims that people are claiming South Korea has a laser weapon to shoot down North Korean drones? Some conservative outlets are even calling it a Star Wars weapon. That's not even what... God damn it.
From Russia into Alaska, as we're told in the history books, and migrated
I was responding to depraved ambience.
down into North and South America. What kind of technology did these people have? How did they live? This video might provide some answers. Check it out.
So the Western idea of what ancient American civilization was like has largely reduced Native Americans to this idea of a migrating, nomadic, savage tribes people who were much less civilized than Europe. But inevitably, the stories and ruins of great but vanished Native American civilizations continue to echo
this is
through
interesting.
time, whether it be
There's racism on both sides here. There's racism in the idea that Native Americans were uncivilized barbarians, and there's also a sort of exoticizing, fetishizing racism in the idea that they were cleaner and purer than us. Historically, we call it the idea of the noble savage. This idea that Native Americans weren't just not barbarians or what have you on that side, but they were actually more pure, more in tune with nature, and almost possessed of a childlike innocence.
Yeah, that
So
pervades...
there's racism on both sides here.
I was gonna say, that pervades a lot of American media from especially the 80s and 90s. The 90s was really bad for this, of like turning any indigenous character into a mystical caricature with secret knowledge and connections to like nature. Real bad. Watch, there's a Saved by the Bell episode. Are you familiar with this? What I'm about to talk about?
No, I've not seen Saved by the Bell. But I will
Ugh.
say, same thing happens for African American people. There's a TV tropes page on it, but I won't say the name
Yeah,
because
I'm familiar.
the technical term for the trope is the magical N-word.
Yep. Which is also why that recent movie had that as a title. Let's see.
I haven't seen that movie. I hope it was good. It seemed like it was probably a pretty funny satire, but I never saw it.
So there's this episode of Saved by the Bell that's pretty famous where Zach fails his history report that's supposed to be on a local tribe to the area. They're based out of California. I'm not exactly sure where, so I don't know what tribe it would be. Anyway, he fails and the teacher sends him to this gentleman who shares his culture with Zach, and then the guy dies, and Zach decides to full-on do this shit for his report.
Oh no.
And then he sees the ghost of the guy that died, who explicitly is now in the Christian heaven.
Oh boy.
So yeah, it's one of those things. Yeah.
There's a lot to unpack there.
Yep.
The explorers who came upon the massive Maya ruins of Tikal and Palenque deep in the Mesoamerican jungle, or the explorers who documented the incomprehensibly enormous stone blocks sitting atop the mountain city of Machu Picchu, Percy Fawcett's numerous expeditions into the Amazon, finding the remnants of entire civilizations living deep within the remote jungle, or even
Chakotay is worse because that was over like 7 years and they didn't catch it until after the show was canceled. H-Bird says, just a reminder, Zach Morris is trash.
in North America.
You know what yeah, you've seen that series. Good.
Where millions of Native Americans
Zach
lived
Morris is
amongst numerous
trash.
kingdoms of earthen pyramids and cliff-dwelling homes. The ancient Americas are not just a singular lost world, it is comprised of multiple lost worlds whose stories and accomplishments have almost been entirely wiped from history.
No,
Suppressed knowledge.
okay,
Alternative historical narratives.
they're not gone. We have, albeit biased, because much of it was written by conquistadors and the like, but we have records of these people. They have descendants who are still alive and quite nobly working very hard to maintain what is left of their culture. These people are not gone.
But to them, they're just like a fictive thing. So to them, they are. Because if they were confronted with a real person who's a descendant of these groups, they'd have to be like, oh yeah, they're human beings, not a prop for my conspiracy mindset.
True.
And unexplained phenomena all challenge the historical narrative of what we know from our textbooks, from our teachers, and in the mainstream. A lot of you have heard of Tartaria. Those of you who watch my channel, you're in the know.
God,
Some
I
of you don't.
wonder- There's no way to know, I don't think, because I don't think that social science is really predictive in this specific way. But I'm so curious what the next great conspiracy is going to be, because QAnon's becoming less popular now, but Tartaria seems to be becoming more so, and I'm deeply curious what's going to come after Tartaria in the next 5 to 10 years.
It's hard to say. I think a lot of that is going to depend upon what happens this November or this afternoon, depending on the Trump news. But,
no comment.
Yeah.
I don't want to get banned.
Yeah, like I said, I know people are talking about that in chat, which is fine. But I don't want to comment on it until more information comes out. I don't want to jump the gun on that. Although it is interesting. Anyway. The future conspiracy theories are going to be heavily dependent upon elections, I think.
God, please
But
vote. As a trans woman, please vote.
Yep.
whether you do or you don't, I think this next video is going to be a very good and clear explanation as to what Tartaria is and its importance and relevance to our search to uncover the true history of our world. Check this out.
History has been lying to us. There was a civilization called the Tartaria Empire that was far superior and more sophisticated than we could ever imagine. They were able to use the atmospheric energy to
I'll be back
obtain
shortly.
electricity,
I have to go eat,
and
but
by
I'll be
having
back
free energy,
afterwards, and I'll be listening.
Okay.
they were
I'm
able
going to take a brief hiatus from talking to go eat.
Okie dokie. I'll
to
see you when you get
focus on
back.
more
Sorry, I'm watching the Trump thing on my phone.
You're good.
I will enjoy your meal. I will see you in a little bit. Chat, I'm watching it. I want to see. Oh! Oh yeah, he like grabbed for his head. Huh. Yeah, maybe they just grazed him? Because there's definitely blood around the ear, but he's not like... He didn't get JFK'd. So like, what in the world? Did they shoot this way and they just like... But it looked like it was coming out of his ear. I don't know. That is strange. Oh my god. Oh, he might actually be fucked up. Holy shit. Fucking damn it.
pressing and more important endeavors, such as
He did one of these, like, we're in the fight! But, like, he looked like he was struggling while he did it. I don't know.
creativity, love, and self-development. Their advancements influenced great feats and built vast cities and infrastructure all over the world. However, due to the rise in the influence of the civilization, it was said that they were systematically destroyed, with their buildings knocked down and technological advancements erased from
Technological advances like rocket skates. Very practical.
our history books by oppressors to keep us all enslaved and in check. That's why many people say that.
What do you think is the truth about our history? Was it suppressed, hidden, buried away? Or is this just all a sham? Or maybe, like Howdy says, it was a past simulation, one different than where we are today. What about the Mandela effect?
It's you misremembering things, sir.
What about the fact that events that we thought happened actually didn't, and vice versa? Was the Earth actually destroyed in 2012 and a new one created,
I think we might have noticed.
implanting us with false memory? What is going on in the world? Is the Earth flat? Or is there truly a star system and universe out there that's so vast that we'll never be able to explore it? What is the truth here? I'm trying to get to the bottom of it. Leave a comment, let me know what you think. And don't forget to support me on Patreon. I post unique videos over there. The link is below. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I will be back tomorrow with another one. If you want me to make more videos on lost technology, Tartaria, just let me know. I have so many ideas for videos. And with that, I am out.
Okay, real quick, I'm gonna take a bathroom break, so stay here for just a minute. Chair will tell you about... Spookies! Chair will tell you about Spookies, a very great movie that doesn't at all feel like two completely unrelated movies stitched together randomly. Let me know if any news comes out about where Trump is, or like if he's breathing. Let me know. I'll be right back. I'm genuinely curious, if Trump gets assassinated by a gunman, is the right's opinion on the Second Amendment gonna change? Just a thought that occurred to me. It's gonna be a weird cope, isn't it? Oh, I thought it was someone was trying to protect you from a despotic government. I thought you said that's what this was for. Anyway, let's see what is next. Try this one.
One of the most obvious pieces of evidence to me is whenever we go...
Doyle is having one. Check Chud subs in Discord. Ooh, yes, will do. Give me one sec. Chuds. I can't even wait. Okay, here's what John said. John says, he literally tells the Secret Service to wait so he can raise his fist to the crowd and tell them to fight. There's only one and there will never be another. Well, that's a bad thing to say if he just got shot.
Across the land and we see beautiful buildings like this, such as the state capitol in Iowa. This is the baseline building for my research on this channel, and the reason for that, it's a building that shouldn't exist there. I think of civilizations as running up a tower. You're always looking to get to the top of the tower as fast as you can, and you're expending a lot of energy to do so. But think of all the previous civilizations that have existed in our lands.
It has not been confirmed that he is shot. There was a bang, there was screaming, the Secret Service tackled him to the ground, and when he got up, his ear was all bloody. Seemingly from bleeding inside, though it could be from outside. I don't know. That's all we know. So I don't want to talk about it at length right now because we just don't have enough information to have a reasonable conversation about it.
I suspect there's 5 eras, but there could be many more. What happens when they reach the top of the tower? Are they able to stay at the top of the tower, or do they fall? Greetings. The 5 eras theory is one of the theories that I use to try to formulate and visualize how the lands could have looked in the past. We have no idea what the actual history is. Yes, we're given a historical account, but we have many inconsistencies in it and we see many contradictions. The portion of the 5 eras theory that I bring up here, though, is dividing it up into looking at how our civilization came to where it is. We start with the Golden Age. And the Golden Age consists of the first 3 eras. Now, there are many cultures that have a division of 5 eras that are across the land, and this is the reason why I picked 5 eras. I don't know. There could be many more, there could be many less. Many things were possible in the Golden Age. Human beings were much more advanced and much more developed spiritually, and they could achieve great architectural achievements. I also believe that in the 3rd era is where the Star Fort builders came from. We're now in our contemporary age, or what others might call the Iron Age, or we jokingly refer to as the Plastic Age.
I'm sorry, he thinks we're in the Iron Age? Currently?
And we call it that because everything is very disposable. And it seems as though we can feel internally that this era that we live in now does not match what was in the past. Although we'll be ridiculed for this, even though there's a lot of evidence that suggests otherwise. Today we're going to be looking at the Tartarian Age, or the 4th era. Now, I call this the Tartarian Age, and there are many alternative researchers that are saying we shouldn't be using this term all the time. It's just a name that's associated with it, a worldwide civilization that existed before our own.
Peep Lord says, play this 145 to 152, no reason. See what it is.
Moral argument. You'll not disapprove of guns unless they're in the right hands. Then they give weight to a moral argument.
But what did it really look like? Well, we have to go back and revisualize the other eras. The first era, the Golden Age, where pretty much anything was possible, where human beings lived exceptionally long lifetimes, and they had an infinite spiritual health. They understood themselves, they understood their environment, and they existed in a wonderful balance with it. Not the promises of balances, but true balances. And their architectural achievements were stunning. They could build buildings that reach to the very clouds, and who knows, perhaps the very nature of the land is very different than we can imagine. It's not just buildings, it could have been vast flora and fauna that existed. And there's a reason why they try to tie this in with explanations of things existing many millions of years ago. But who knows what the actual timeline is? Was this first era of the Golden Age 10,000 years ago, 100,000 years ago, or 5,000 years ago? We don't really have any way to know. And the only remnants we see of this are in great rocks and in certain areas of the land where we have hints of once great buildings that existed in the very distant past. Or maybe it wasn't such a distant past after all, because the forces that destroyed these buildings and leveled the land are things that we cannot understand.
A young Earth creationist, most likely on top of the Tartaria stuff, yeah.
We can certainly speculate on them. The whole point behind the first era of the Golden Age is to understand that in the very beginning, we believe that human beings were exceptionally developed. Now, this theory could be completely wrong, but the evidence that backs it up is whenever you go across the land and you find evidence of melted buildings, vast structures that once covered the land. And on this channel, we explore
Talking about mountains. He looks at mountains and goes, I think that's building shaped. It used to be a building.
the Castle Rock ruins in Wisconsin, and we saw that there were hints of vast structures that once existed there that had to be larger than we could possibly imagine. We also see structures such as Devil's Tower. It may have once been a large tree, or it may have once been a large structure, or something else. In the second era, we postulate a civilization that existed, rising from the ashes of the first era. Now, others may call this
I like that there's a pyramid just cause that's an old worldy thing.
the Silver Age, and we'll review what this really was when we look at the Greek theory of
This is
the
definitely AI generated also.
5 ages. However, the second era, this is where we suspect the pyramid builders really came from. And we think of the original pyramids, or the Great Pyramids on the Giza Plateau. They were simply smaller satellite pyramids. We have evidence of much larger pyramids that are built across the land.
Wait, he thinks even like the Great Pyramid of Giza is small compared to whatever this hypothetical pyramid is? Okay.
In my theories on this channel, I believe that this came from a second era, or a civilization that was still in a golden age, but in a different portion of a golden age. They constructed pyramids because it was a geometrically sound structure, and it also showed their connection to the land. And we don't fully understand what kind of technology that was available both in the construction of these pyramids, and then how they factored into the overall society and the use of such technology. But we suspect that these buildings also developed the internal human being. They supported the spiritual health of the person, and not just provided a structure for societal use. It's a very interesting balance to think of. A building that serves society, but at the same time serves the individual. It seems as though our modern buildings oftentimes deprive us of our spiritual health, and they're very, how shall we say, not even remotely aesthetically pleasing. They're just...
Again, that's literally not your personal taste, and the fact that buildings are built for practical purposes instead of to look good is not evidence that we have declined as a civilization technologically. There are material and social reasons that buildings look different today than they did X amount of years ago. The lack of critical thought is so frustrating.
There to be there and serve a function. The third era, which is another era in the last era of the Golden Age, that followed the pyramid builders. And this was an era where we believe that the civilization advanced to building the great star forts, where they could manipulate the land and the structures and integrate them accordingly. No one really knows what heights this civilization reached, but we can speculate that they had tremendous capabilities to build towers to the very sky. They also had the ability to form and
Peep Lord says, sorry, doing laundry, this link and some bits fell out of someone's pants pocket. That was negligent of them. Let's see what it is.
Hi, I'm
Just insert former in here from time to time.
Trevor Moore.
I'll play this. I don't know how this is gonna go on YouTube, but fuck it, I want to play this so bad.
Did you know that it's illegal to say I want to kill the President of the United States of America? It's illegal. It's a federal offense. It's one of the only sentences that you're not allowed to say. Now, it was okay for me to say it right then
I am
because
back.
I was just telling
If
you
I
that
go
it's
quiet, I'm munching.
Okay.
illegal to say, I want to kill the President of the United States of America. I'm not actually saying it. I'm just letting you know that it's illegal to say that. It's kind of like a public service. I'm letting you know so that you don't accidentally go out and say something like that. But what's interesting is that it's very illegal to say, I really, really think someone out there should kill the President of the United States of America. That's illegal, extremely illegal, very, very illegal, but not illegal to say with a mortar launcher. Because that's its own sentence. It's an incomplete sentence, but it may have nothing to do with the sentence before that. So that's perfectly fine, perfectly legal. I also found out that it's incredibly illegal, extremely illegal, to go on television and say something like the best place to fire a mortar launcher at the White House would be from the roof of the Rockefeller Hewitt building because of minimal security and you'd have a clear line of sight to the president's bedroom. Insanely illegal. Ridiculously, recklessly, insanely illegal. Yet even more illegal to show an illustrated diagram. Insanely illegal, ridiculously, horribly felonious, because they will come to your house in the middle of the night and they will lock you up. Extremely against the law. One thing that is technically legal to say is that we have a group that meets Fridays at midnight under the Brooklyn Bridge, and the password is Sic Semper Tyrannis.
Okay.
Shape.
Thing I would like to say. We know why star forts were built.
Yeah.
They're good for deterring cannon fire because of their angles.
Yeah, they glance off. Yep.
But also, this concept of a golden age of a given civilization is flawed.
Yeah.
Flawed.
I think the idea of golden ages in general is flawed, whether it's civilization or anything else. Every time I hear the golden age of comics, I wanna bash my face against a wall. I know why we do that, but it certainly wasn't the best period of comics, so it's weird that we conceptualize things that way. Is the original era is always the golden era, and then silver
We've been doing
and
it.
bronze.
The ancient Romans believed in that there was the ancient Romans are where this originates, at least in the West.
Yeah. All right. Let's
Also,
continue
total
with
tangent. Ed Greenwood, the original writer of the Forgotten Realms, has confirmed on Twitter that tiefling tales are an erogenous zone. So that's good D&D lore for you tiefling enjoyers.
I don't know anything about that.
The land in geometrical configurations that endure to this day. We can see the remnants of this civilization everywhere we look across the lands. There are star forts everywhere. There are also star forts that are integrated in the very land. We also have the theories about how the land is shaped in many places, where we see large sandbars that extend for many miles on the coasts in many lands across the realm. Now we look at our current era, the fifth era, the plastic age, and we see that none of what it is really compares to what we had in the past. We have tall...
This isn't even close to the good things I imagined in my head.
Where is all the magic I believe I made up in my brain?
All towers
I'm not blushing, chat. You're blushing. Shut up.
of glass and steel, yet they give the impression of being very cheap and disposable. They also show us the fact that our civilization just seems to be something that's readily thrown away and can be thrown away. We also have to
doesn't
remember that we
understand their problem is capitalism on the bingo card.
That should be a free space at this point.
have many, many images of destruction from films, television shows. But today we're going to look specifically at the fourth era, the Tartarian civilization, or the civilization that preceded ours. We want to get an idea of what heights they reached, what was the maximum extent of their capabilities. Because this is the civilization that we see the most defined and detailed remnants of, such as the Iowa State Capitol.
I'm not a city planner, but I feel like the layout of this city's a fucking nightmare. Like, I know this is just a random illustration you probably had an AI do, but like, the fuck is this?
Robert Moses would never.
So in the center by that palace, is there just the world's biggest roundabout? How does this work?
But the many other beautiful state capitol buildings, the Art Deco buildings, all these buildings that we look at and all these city explorations that we do, they reflect the remnants of the Fourth Era. Now, let's look at the Tartarian Fourth Era civilization. And remember, Tartaria is just a term that I assigned to it. The civilization could have been called something completely different. Here's a possible timeline. Break it down into 3 eras, if you will, or 3 portions, 3 phases. An inception and a rising phase, an ascendancy in the height of their civilization, and then a decline and a fall. How long were each of these phases of this Tartarian civilization? We just don't know. They could be 1,000 years. They could be 100 years. We seem to have a great obsession with 1,000 years. And it's probably
1,000-year world order. I'm sure that doesn't have anything to do with this guy's other political beliefs.
In fairness,
Sorry, that's uncharitable.
I know that
that's uncharitable.
I know what you're referencing, but he might also be referencing a biblical thing, because Hitler in part got that from the 1,000-year reign of, like, Jesus that's supposed to happen.
That's true.
So,
and to be fair, Queen America was also the queen of the lands between for 1,000 years, so.
Alpha Mariox says, Hannah, do you remember the name of the thief from The Legend of Zelda, Majora's Mask? The one who steals the masks from, Cafe? The Skull Kid? Is that the I don't know, I've not played Majora's Mask. I feel like I'm gonna get crucified for that, but I've not played Majora's Mask. Nor have I played Ocarina of Time. My first Zelda game was Wind Waker. I'm 30.
Because it's a nice round number.
I've never played a Zelda game.
Oh, well, that's inexcusable. Jesus Christ, go get Wind Waker. Obviously, that's the best one because it's the first one I played, and that has nothing to do with my nostalgia.
I have dripped and drabbed in like a few levels or so of 1 or 2, but no, I've never really sat down and played one.
God damn. Well, you need to do that. Someone make that happen. Your partners are in chat. One of them make her play Zelda. Zelda's good.
I don't own a Switch, so
I'm sure there are other means somewhere for you to do things with eye patches and peg legs and
I don't know. Nintendo is notoriously litigious, so I don't know.
You know, as someone who definitely doesn't have Wind Waker installed through an emulator on my tablet, I'm sure there are no ways out there to get it easily.
What did this really look like, though? The main component of this theory is we have to consider the society that existed in this worldwide civilization, their culture, their values, their capabilities, and then ultimately their vulnerabilities. How was it they fell? When they rose, it was clear that they had remnants of the previous era, the Third Era. But we suspect that the Third Era endured a great reset or some sort of cataclysm. Looking at what this civilization looked like during its height, we have to think on the integration potentially of pyramid buildings, great towers and domes that reach to the very sky. They had energy capabilities and the ability to generate energy, both from the atmosphere, and then we've also speculated that they had some sort of crystal power source. They may have
a crystal power source, like Krypton, like on the planet Krypton, how everything's crystals. Again, they just steal ideas that were already made up by someone else in some sort of fiction, and then go, yep, what if that was real?
had many other sources of energy that they were able to draw from, because it's energy that allowed them to build a great society and civilization. Yet at the same time, we speculate that they had a balance.
These people talk about energy not from a scientific standpoint, but the same way if I'm DMing a game of Dungeons and Dragons, the same way I would talk about like a creature not having enough spell slots to do something.
Yeah, they use it very differently than the real world definition. And also, Nemesaur, holy crap, 20 tier 1 subs. Thank you so much for your generosity to myself in the chat today and the other days that you gift subs. Thank you. Keeplord also says, did they find those crystals under the command center? That's a good reference. Zeo crystals. Who got that? You could be my friend if you understood that reference.
I guess we can't be friends anymore.
Nope, fuck off.
Balance that they achieved.
That was mean as a
Okay,
joke.
I'll
I'm
leave.
sorry. No, don't leave. I'm sorry.
Between the society and the individual. Harvesting this energy may have well reflected that balance in the fact that they were able to understand the energy that they could harvest from both the land and the very air in the atmosphere, and at the same time the energy that existed beneath the land. It seems as though this gave them the capability, along with their developed cultural and societal understanding, to achieve great constructions beyond our wildest dreams. We only see the bare bones remnants of many of these wonderful structures.
Why do I bully you? Half of you are into it.
Think on the fact that we have diagrams and
I plead the
sketches
fifth.
that show us these incredible buildings at their very height. Yet we take this to even what many would consider a science
That looks
fiction
like AI.
imaging.
Yeah, like all the images in this have pretty much been AI stuff that if you zoomed in on it, it's fucking nonsense. It only makes sense from this far away.
Or imagery of what the society may have looked like at their very height. They had airships, they had vast tall buildings across the land.
Wow, vast tall
Again-
buildings. We could never do that today. Coughs and
They
Burj Khalifa.
They just want to live in someone's like Magitech D&D setting.
I mean, I want that too. The difference is I don't delude myself currently into thinking it's real.
They had cities that stretched for many, many miles, much larger than the cities that we see today. And their structures were built to be enduring, to last. And of course you'll ask, well, exactly how did such a large signature of such a civilization fall? Why is it not with us? We don't understand the capabilities that were used to destroy it. We suspect that there was some sort of force or threat that arose in the land that either defeated the civilization internally or externally. A lot of the hints that we have, though, indicate that it was defeated internally. Initially in
That's
the conflict,
even more
the civilization
vague than the sea people.
Yeah, it was defeated either by people outside or inside. Yep, those are the options.
I mean, I guess by definition, one of those is true.
won in an external conflict. Now, what do we mean by an internal conflict? This adversary found some sort of way to infiltrate the very beings of people and turn them against the civilization. We look at the great beauty at the very height, imagining a civilization that was in total balance. And it's not just the balance between society and the individual, it's also the understanding of the many cultural groups that no doubt existed in this civilization. They were able to exist in a harmonious nature. And we might reflect on the fact that it seems as though everything in our current civilization operates to turn us against each other through any...
I really wonder what this guy's personal politics are, because I'm gonna imagine it's not all kumbaya and hugs.
Probably not very in line with the things he's saying.
No, I would imagine to him, people living in harmony means everyone agreed with me. Everyone was like me, and they all thought the same things I thought, so we all got along.
Any visual difference, or any sort of difference, be it a perceived economic, political, or whatever, to keep us at each other's throats. We look...
Wow, that's AI's best shot at some sort of steampunk dirigible, huh? It looks like H.R.
That's a shame,
Geiger's
I like-
diarrhea.
I like a good dirigible,
Look at
but
some
that's
of the
not
other
a good dirigible.
Mm-mm.
possibilities of the previous civilization. Great airships with no limits in their traveling capacity. Great airships that could travel the land very quickly and efficiently. There's been a lot...
Because when I think quick air travel, I think fucking... fucking dirigibles.
A lot of speculation
I
about
mean-
airplanes
Never mind, I'm not going to get into a dirigible rant.
recently, and
I
perhaps
have
the reality
one. Maybe another time.
behind airplanes and jets is that they use some remnant of this technology, and that's why they appear to take
You
off
can
and
tell because he made this AI image of a blimp with wings. So that's evidence that he's right.
land so slowly, almost as though they're hovering in a way and they don't operate in the manner that we're told. Yet we look at these great images of these airships and their vast hangars, and again, we still...
Again, these AI image... Does he think these are real? Did he find these?
I wonder...
Or did he...
I wonder maybe...
Like, there's no way he thinks these are real. He must have made these.
I AI is so popular amongst these people, and I wonder. This is total speculation. I have no reason to think this is true. But I wonder if they maybe trick themselves into believing that the AI is somehow capable of recreating some kind of lost knowledge.
It's possible some of them do treat like language learning models basically like they're magic, so I could see that. You can tell these are all from the same set because the style is very similar. So it was using the same program with similar keywords. So I'm assuming he made these. I don't know.
I think so. Oh,
See,
oh, I just touched my chest against something. Not good.
Yep, don't do that. H Baird with a link. Let's see where this goes.
Oh, and once I saw a blimp.
the remnants of this technology scattered across the land. This is what will be shown airship hangars looked like in the 1920s. The fact being, though, is that this did really exist. It causes us to question if the capacity behind this, though, is far greater than we're shown, that this is merely the bare bones remnants of it, the only portions of the technology that they could return to operational capacity. It's interesting to me that we even have accounts that question the existence and the veracity of these airships docking with tall buildings and tall structures. Some cities, such as Tulsa, even completely deny the account that an airship ever docked with any tall structure in the city. Yet there are other accounts within the history of aviation that shows that this is very true, and this was far more commonplace than they'd like us to think now. We consider the fact that there's been a very defined attack on airships. Now we visualize the decline of this previous
attack
civilization.
on airships.
Are you telling me this isn't the best way to get from place to place, and it's maybe dangerous to have a big thing full of hydrogen up in the air? I know that you would. I know that they were supposed to use helium, but helium is in short supply, so probably not a great call to use it for a bunch of what would probably be luxury airships, because no one's going to use them for business or simply fast travel. It would be the equivalent of a cruise ship in the sky.
There are some efficient ways we could use it if we didn't exist under capitalism, but
yeah, like
that is true of many things.
Like making Gotham look badass at night.
True.
If we suspect that they won a physical external war against some unknown enemy, we have to realize that the unknown enemy changed its tactics and infiltrated the civilization itself by corrupting human beings from the inside. As a result, they began to corrupt the very facets that kept the civilization propped up, considering the fact that the civilization was based on an effective government that actually worked in the interests of the people. That was probably one of the first.
Again,
there it is.
Based on nothing, he's speculating not only about the architecture and culture, but the fucking governmental function of this non-existent society.
But also, there it is. A nebulous other has infiltrated our society and is engineering our cultural and social decline.
Yeah. Right-wing,
there it is.
shit. Yeah.
Things that changed. The government then became self-serving, or serving the purposes and intentions of the exterior force that infiltrated it.
That
Therefore,
could never happen without some nefarious shadow government taking over. Governments have never been self-serving.
Are people just in denial about human nature? Like, how much of this is people just not wanting to accept that they're a part of a species that, when given access to power on an individual level, it ends really badly? Like, is it just wanting to not believe it? Is it wanting to think that, no, humans are wonderful all the time and never hurt each other? It's only when people trick us that we hurt each other and are selfish.
I don't know, because I'm not here to talk philosophy, really. I'm pretty optimistic about human nature such as I believe it exists. So I don't know if that's the case. I don't know. But maybe it's because I'm not blindly optimistic. Like, maybe because I do recognize the possibility of, like, bad social influences, for lack of a better term, ruining sort of the better parts of us. So maybe
Sure,
my optimism is more
people of course
pragmatic than theirs.
people of course are moved by their material and social circumstances. I'm not disagreeing. I just mean there is a bent where when people are, especially if they're desperate, but like not always, there's a self-interest. People sometimes follow self-interest to the detriment of others around them, and that is a piece of human nature that can be exacerbated or diminished, but it is always there to some extent, and always ripe for uh really, really shitty things, basically.
Mm.
Turn the civilization against one another, emphasizing every single physical, social, and economic difference, whether they were real or not. Even the perceived differences, the ideals, caused these people to begin to distrust one another, and gradually their civilization began to erode from the inside out. The great buildings were no longer maintained, the energy systems were neglected. People began to even question their once great purpose in life, and achieving the very pinnacle of human being. They began to turn away from that.
It just feels like he's trying to literally write an allegory for how he considers society right now. He's just putting up a mirror and creating an allegory.
Just read Paradise Lost. It's been done before.
True. I know Mellow Fire. We heard about it. I'm waiting to talk about it until there is more information, because all I can say is, looks like maybe he got shot, but we don't know. And that's the end of my statement about it until we know more.
And you can find evidence in that in every single account from every civilization and culture that exists on the land today.
But I will tell you this, if he dies, the MAGA Cope stream is gonna be incredible.
That people were corrupted.
I shouldn't have said that. I'm sorry. I
magnificent.
shouldn't have said
Eventually, it became a point to where the civilization could no longer defend itself from an external threat, and either using some natural cataclysm, or perhaps an unnatural cataclysm, an artificial attack using weapons beyond our greatest imagination, they were able to destroy and wreck many of the greatest structures of the civilization that preceded ours. And we have numerous stories of destruction of great edifices in the past, wondrous cities that were reduced to nothing, melted to ash and rubble, and we really don't see any remnants of it today.
There's that
We think that perhaps the Great Fire
tendency to syncretize there. This idea that because there are lots of stories about sort of mythical cities suffering some kind of disaster, it must be true.
It's so strange because, like, we know there have been instances of things like this. Pompeii, like, that's happened. Like, natural disasters happen. How does he not understand that that's where these stories come from? It doesn't mean there's, like, the specific one he's talking about and made up as true.
Right. Also, I'm gonna go grab some water, so I'll be right back.
Okay. H-Baird says, if you want to feel like you're doing something without actually doing anything, you can always send thoughts and prayers. Big Steph fan? That's a conspiracy theory.
fires that we read about that seem to dot every single city in the 19th century may have been the finalized destruction of the great structures that remained. We also consider the fact that we have many tales from both biblical and mainstream accounts of vast destruction in the past, even as recently as the 20th century, considering the Tunguska event in Siberia, and even the destruction of the Bronx, which occurred supposedly as late as the 1970s and the early 1980s. Yet the concept of fire from the sky is something that we have to take a lot more seriously. There had to be some great force that was employed, and that's how many of the greatest structures that once existed were utterly annihilated. And here's an image of what remains of the Castle Rock ruins, as I called it, in Wisconsin.
Kind of looks like the moon of Yavin 4, where that rebel was, like, blocking the spaceship coming in. Does anyone know the shot I'm talking about? Someone knows what I'm talking about.
Yet you can see
H-Baird, you know what I'm talking about.
It's the remnants of once great buildings. Now, I suspect that this is from an earlier era, but this could be as recently as the last era, the fourth era, or the Tartarian civilization. We just don't know. So we have to operate on speculation and try to put the pieces together to put together the overall story of what really happened. And why do I suspect that these ruins are much older and are actually the ruins of these great buildings? Well, it's because of the fact that you can't really get an idea of the structures, but you still see signs of symmetry in these ruins. And these signs of symmetry and the vast magnitude that they reflected had to be the once great structures of the first era. The structures that reached to the very clouds, the legends that we have of such edifices as the Tower of Babel. Yet there are many other accounts that indicate that there were once very large structures that existed, again through societies and cultures across the land, and we'll be told it was merely the work of the gods. This is a idealized depiction of the Golden Age from the Greek account of the Golden Age, and they have a different breakdown of the 5 eras or the 5 portions of civilization.
They literally just wanted people to be naked and fuck each other. They were the fucking Greeks or Romans.
The Golden Age, the human beings lived amongst the gods. They lived for hundreds of years, and their spirits endured even after they died. They never grew old. Now, is that a reality, or is that just something that we're told to convince us to believe in it? It's ultimately up for you to decide. Of course, now we'll be told that a golden age can be reached again with our technology, and we've always been promised this great future. Although, as time passes...
Not always. That's a pretty mid-20th century, like, to the early 2000s thing. Like, that's the kind of optimistic techno-futurism that you'll think of when you think of, like, the Jetsons or retrofuturism. That's particular to a time and place and exists for specific reasons.
We see that no great future.
Not like that's always been the human ideal. It is not. The idea of techno-futurism is a relatively recent idea.
A lot of that existed in 2 times and died 2 deaths, really. There were people who believed a lot of that prior to both world wars, and were kind of disillusioned with the idea after that, and then it sort of was reborn sort of between the fall of the Soviet Union until
post 9/11,
roughly. I'd say a little bit before, probably when it was clear the Cold War wasn't a good idea.
Yeah.
And then that idea sort of became less popular again.
And see that our society continues to grow.
I'm snacking now.
You're fine.
I was way more hungry than I thought I was.
That's fine. I'm probably going to be done when we finish this video or around there. I'm pretty hungry too and need to get off. We're going much longer than you said you were good for anyway. If you need to go, let me know. But I'm probably going to go for another 10-ish minutes and then be good.
No, I'm good.
Okay.
It continues to be something that just feels as though that the quality of service and the quality of life is decreasing. Of course, you'll be told that you're wrong and the quality of life is increasing. However, anybody who has any self-awareness and is capable of thinking for themselves can see that the quality of life is declining.
Have you noticed that thinking for yourself means ignoring, like, evidence-based results? Or, like, data? It's interesting. And I get it, statistics can be misleading. But I don't know, just feels like a lot of people these days are proud to be idiots and not look at any data, and that's frustrating.
I don't think it's idiocy.
Okay, I think
it's a...
Go ahead.
It's a preference for intuitive patterns of thought.
I hate that shit. I hate it. I hate raw intuitive thinking. It's a poison, and I don't like it.
Sorry, I don't like the use of words like idiot, typically.
I know.
It's not
You're not wrong.
Garden of Eden. It's not this idealized existence. That just seems to be a false promise that we're given in our current state of being. Did it exist in the past? Well, it must have, because we have accounts of it. And we are constantly detracted or deterred from...
Well, I guess that means he's a biblical literalist.
I guess so.
Even trying to visualize this. And we are not encouraged to think that this existed in the past. As though someone doesn't want us to even be able to visualize how great society can be. We have
a picture of people having an orgy in a fountain. They don't. This is what they took from us.
I like a good orgy. I like a good orgy.
God, I hope that fountain's chlorinated.
Depictions of allusions to things such as a fountain of youth. And why is that so alluring to us? Why is it we fear aging
Because
and death so much?
Because aging and getting old and dying are unpleasant and scary.
Even in the Golden Age, death was a part of life. Apparently, aging was not, according to the accounts that we have. Now, whether they're true or not is irrelevant.
What does that mean? How does one have to die if they do not age? That doesn't make any sense.
I think he's talking about it from a biblical point of view, so he's talking about the fact that the patriarchs of the Old Testament often lived hundreds and hundreds of years, but because they were no longer in the Garden of Eden and did not have access to the tree of the fruit of life, they had to die at some point. It's biblical.
True.
It's biblical shit.
We still have this perception that the fear of life comes from the ultimate fear of death and the fear of aging. And you can see many examples of how both these fears are used time and time again. We also have accounts of great civilizations that may or may not have existed, such as the legendary kingdom of Prester John. We're told that this was merely a myth that motivated European explorers to go across the land and try to attempt to locate what they believed was an ally to Christendom in the distant past.
It was a myth.
It was a myth, you just said?
Prester, are you familiar?
I am not.
So, let me finish eating real quick. So, basically, Prester John was this myth that there was a lost patriarch of Christianity who ruled a mythical Christian kingdom in Africa somewhere.
Okay.
And it was an idea that was really motivating to a lot of European explorers because they thought they would contact this sort of mythical Christian king and they would form this grand alliance and they do some crusading. That's the basic idea.
Lovely. Don't you love when historical events turn on complete falsehoods? And, like, people's lives were ruined in part because some people just believed some shit that outright was not true?
I mean, who doesn't love a good crusade?
I imagine most of the victims.
At some of the accounts of Prester John, it almost feels as though we're given accounts of a remnant or an enclave, an organized enclave of the Tartarian civilization or the Fourth Era that somehow survived the reset and continued to exist and may have existed much closer to the contemporary era than we like to think. Naturally, it was targeted and destroyed over time, and perhaps these are what the Great Campaigns or the Massive Reset War that we speculated occurred in the 19th century may have been all about destroying. These enclaves that existed across the land, and perhaps the enclave of Prester John, or whatever the real name was of the individual or society that existed there. Yet looking around, we still see many of the bare bones remnants of the previous civilization, and it's everywhere. Such as here in New Orleans, where you'll see a lot of accounts and a lot of images that show that great advanced buildings existed there. Defenders of the mainstream account will tell us, well, it was simply part of the great French presence that existed in North America and that they forfeited it when they sold it as part of the Louisiana Purchase because of the Napoleonic Wars, which are a very questionable event in and of themselves.
What? What?
You just said the Napoleonic Wars are questionable.
Okay. It's not really an exaggeration. Before everyone hated Hitler, everyone hated Napoleon.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So, like, there's a lot of people talking about how much Napoleon sucked. It's pretty well documented.
That's actually why Moriarty is referred to as the Napoleon of crime. The modern equivalent would be calling a character the Adolf Hitler of crime, basically. Which is kind of funny. It's extreme, but yeah.
Yet we see many of these buildings, and while they may be smaller in scale, we suspect that these buildings are the remnants of the previous civilization, that they reflected their greatness. Now, this is a building that supposedly preceded the Art Deco era in Cleveland, And yet we see such beauty and
I
amazing
swear these people
architectural
just need
achievement.
an art history class.
Art history's hard, though.
I love art history. I briefly considered making that my specific area of focus in my degree. I still might.
My least favorite class in college was art appreciation.
That's fair.
Like, it's not that I don't appreciate art. I hate about having to write about it with citations.
You hate the academic part.
Yes. I do not appreciate art academically.
With it, with
except for the Piss Christ. Fuck yeah, Piss Christ.
the pediment and the columns, and even the height and the beauty and the artistic desire of it. Perhaps this was just a small administrative building that existed in the previous civilization. Or the Marble Room, going back to Cleveland. A beautiful, amazing place to dine, which, again, displays the connection between a society and an individual. A place where you can go and interact with other individuals and at the same time feel your internal being strengthened just by being present in this room. And during the exploration of this particular...
Does he think that the fact that humans are very pro-social animals and thus we feel a sense of mental and emotional well-being when we have sort of third spaces that allow us to socialize with each other, right? Does he think that is some form of magic?
I don't know.
Because he seems to.
It is weird the things that they seem to not understand and then extrapolate out to some sort of cosmic force. That is weird.
room, I joked that even a McDonald's hamburger would taste like fine dining if you had this kind of atmosphere and environment that you're eating it in.
Okay, so there is a certain amount of classism to, like, fine dining, but not to that extent. There is a difference between a McDonald's cheeseburger and an actual, like, freshly cooked stuff with fresh ingredients.
We also see the remaining state capitals, and we have no doubt that these are clearly the remaining buildings of the previous civilization.
Clearly.
Perhaps they were low-level administration buildings, or they were regional administration buildings that survived whatever targeted effects of the last reset occurred, whether that was some sort of artificial weapon, a directed energy weapon, or some other power means that we don't understand. Perhaps the very technology of the previous civilization was subverted and used against it, which we speculated was cymatics. We see images of the current age, also called the Iron Age, or what we call the Plastic Age, which states that
those are not the same.
No, he calls the modern age the Iron Age. When he says Iron Age, he doesn't mean it in the actual academic sense.
I know he doesn't, but like I was eating when you first said it. That phrase has a meaning. I and this is just me sort of having a connection to it, I guess, because this is my or I hope for this to be my job one day. I would love to study professionally as some sort of scholar or professor. It just, the words have meaning, and it's endlessly frustrating to me how conspiracy theorists do not know and do not care to know those meanings.
No, because that takes time and effort, and they have to listen, and that's not what they want to do. That takes work, and it takes questioning your own preconceptions and own understanding of the world, and that's hard. I don't mean that insultingly, by the way. I mean that as a matter of fact. It is difficult to, like, do work, and some people are more inclined to go inward for this kind of thing. It's unfortunate.
People are born with gray hair, that people age rapidly, and they live a very harsh lifestyle, and that the only people who aspire to greatness are the people who are the most proficient at lying. And we see a lot of truth in this. We see a lot of truth in this in our contemporary society, and also in the accounts that we have.
On your fellow human beings, my guy.
Pretty what on your fellow human beings?
It's a pretty bleak opinion. He said, everyone lives a short, unpleasant life, and the only people who can aspire to greatness are the best liars. I don't know, that's a pretty bleak
Nihilistic.
on your fellow human beings.
Yeah.
Of the past, where a society or a civilization is subverted by its own ruthless desires. We also think of all the images that we have of utterly destroyed cities, which again reinforces the notion that the previous civilization was completely annihilated, that many of their great buildings were destroyed, and only certain buildings managed to survive this reset. Of course, this is from St. Louis, and we have a mainstream account that's utterly silly in my mind, that a steamboat or a paddle steamer started this fire because it crashed into other boats on the river, and then it crashed into buildings somehow and started a great conflagration.
It's just personal incredulity.
Yep. He can't picture it as being realistic, therefore it's not.
So have the Chicago fire, and we see immense images of apocalyptic destruction from the Chicago fire. Somehow the city was quickly built in a short period of time. The Chicago fire occurred in the 1870s, and then they quickly rebuilt it, to the point to where they were ready to have the greatest World's Fair of all time in the 1890s. Now, if you want to believe this mainstream account, that's entirely up to you, and maybe you think this is credible. Maybe you think these kind of amazing feats in logistics are possible because people worked hard, and if they didn't work hard, they starved and they died. Yet I find this account very hard to believe, and I find it much more likely that these are images of the last phases of destruction of the previous civilization, where they were targeting any buildings that would be too difficult to explain, or buildings that they could not convincingly repurpose and put in a presupposed narrative. Now, yes, we say narrative, and that term gets a lot of derisive attitude towards it, and rightfully so.
Derision. He couldn't think of the word derision.
However, it is a narrative. It is an account that we're supposed to believe. And the whole point behind it is to cause us to not have any understanding of our true history. Because if we don't know our true history, then we don't know our true identity. Our identity can be shaped to whatever power that truly rules the land wants our identity to be. We're simply nothing. We're creatures who have no greater spiritual health or existence, and we exist for their very pleasure, to be used and discarded as soon as we're done. And they'll openly admit this, too, in mainstream accounts. Yet we look back...
Who's they? What?
It's also a bad misunderstanding of like the philosophical position of nihilism too. Like the idea of nihilism isn't that everything doesn't matter and you should be miserable all the time.
In fairness, he didn't call it nihilism. I did. Maybe he's more being cynical. He's very cynical about the nature of human beings rather than nihilistic. Nihilism would be it doesn't matter, nothing matters, effectively. Play? I couldn't tell. Sorry, it sounded like you were maybe...
Go ahead.
Back to the Golden Age.
I was, but I decided
and we realized that there was something much greater. There are accounts that our civilization and our people and our identity was much greater in the distant past. That's the real purpose behind these explorations. It's a journey inward to rediscover the strength that lies within every human being. That's why my approach is not to tell you what to think. You have to decide for yourself what to think. You have to decide for yourself what to believe, who to listen to, and what's really true and real and what's not. And I'm not ever going to insult anyone by insulting what they believe, and if you believe the mainstream account is correct, well then go ahead. It's not going to bother me whatsoever. However, going back to the previous age, there's no doubt that it seemed to be a return to the glories of the distant past. At its very height, the Tartarian age did reach that, with a balance...
How frustrating is it knowing how dense and interesting history is, and this guy, instead of looking at real history, decided to make up his own?
Oh, it's incredibly frustrating. Sorry, you can probably hear my dog in the background. He angry. But it's incredibly frustrating, because, like, is it not more interesting to know the truth? Like, it's so much more interesting to me, and, like, to know that, humans, our kind, our civilization, is so vast and so multifaceted that I could study it for the rest of my life and I'd never really understand it all. I think there's something really inspiring about that, but they are not interested.
Bummer.
Is there a grown-up word for buildings that serve a social function by signaling things? Like weather with light bulbs or something? Not in general, I don't think, but there might be.
Between society and the individual, with a true cultural understanding. Perhaps the story of the Tower of Babel is not so distant or legendary as we like to think. Perhaps it's not reflecting the differences in languages, but simply reflecting the differences in civilizations and cultures as they've now been inherently divided and are encouraged to be divided by the current ruling powers of the lands. Because it's a lot easier to retain control when you keep people divided. You keep them unaware of what their past is. They live in a state of amnesia, or much worse, they live with a fabricated past. And that's the question people always ask. Why would anybody go to the trouble of doing this? Because you can achieve total control. Now, we haven't really explored who the enemy is, or who really caused all this, the previous fall of civilization and humanity. We're going to explore that in an upcoming video on this channel called The Ancient Enemy. There's going to be some theories.
It's reptilians, so you know what that means. It's just anti-Semitism with a different coat of paint.
Involved, but there is a lot of evidence, and that evidence is found in the current actions that we witness every day in the land, for how people are divided, how people may be subverted from within, and what's the true nature of the external threat. Remember that these buildings still exist. They are everywhere. And this is hard evidence that a previous civilization existed.
We're not playing bingo today.
You can go to the Iowa State Capitol, you can touch the internal walls and the external walls, and you can see that this is all true material. It is real, and it is still with us everywhere.
Yes, your understanding of it is wrong. It's not that the buildings don't exist, it's that your understanding is wrong. Oh, that's frustrating.
That's important to remember as we continue our explorations. And that's what we're going to do. Thank you for joining me.
Wow, that was very loud there at the end.
It was. All right, I think I'm done for the day. I'm hungry and tired, so I'm gonna act on that. Thank you so much, Amber, for coming on. I appreciate it. I appreciate your insights.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
We should do it again sometime.
Sounds good. I don't think I'm gonna do a raid. I'm really tired. I'm just gonna end the stream. So thanks everyone for hanging out. Do you have anything you want to plug? Do you have anywhere you want people to follow you?
I'm gonna start writing video essays soon, so I guess I'll plug my Twitter, and when that goes up, I'll post it on Twitter. So if anyone has liked my commentary thus far, I will be doing more of it. I'm in the process of writing right now, so I'm gonna post a link in chat. Follow that link and follow me on the Twitter machine.
Sounds great. Thank you again for all your time and insight. Everyone else, I hope you have a wonderful evening, and I will either see you tomorrow or Monday. I'm not sure. I'm tired. If I end up taking tomorrow off, cool. If not, even better. We'll see. All right. Good night, everyone. Say good night, Amber.
Good night.
Oh, you didn't say good night,
Amber.